Qatar quaked Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, Yuletide season, new central bank forex intervention for BDCs comes effective this week as federal government offers December savings bond for subscription. Africa Export-Import Bank says continent needs $20 billion yearly investment to boost rail transport. This is Business Express, the first edition in the last month of the year, and it's reaching you from our Abuja studios. My name is Musa Abubakar, your guide for the day. Now let's begin the program with oil and gas sector. Qatar is quitting the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, from January 2019. Saad Al-Kabir, the country's energy minister at a news conference in Doha Monday, said that the decision to withdraw from OPEC came after Qatar reviewed ways to enhance its role internationally and planned its long-term strategy. He said the decision was not linked to a political and economic boycott of Qatar imposed since June 2017 by OPEC's de facto leader, Saudi Arabia, and 3 other Arab states. The announcement comes ahead of the meeting by OPEC and its allies, including Russia, on December 6 to 7 to discuss cutting supply. Al-Kabir explained that it was not an easy decision as Qatar has been in OPEC for 57 years, but that the country's impact on OPEC production decision was small. He stressed that Doha will continue to abide by all its commitments like any other non-OPEC oil producer. Qatar is one of OPEC's smallest producers, but the world's largest liquefied natural gas exporter. Since Nigeria returned to democracy in 1999, subnationals have had to go to the Federation account to get funding to meet their obligations. By 2016, when Nigeria got into a recession, it was clear that most states cannot survive without monthly allocation from the Federation account, raising concerns amongst financial and economic experts. Leah Katun Babatunde in this report looks at the performance of states and revenue drive.
Nigeria's government expenditure is one of the smallest globally relative to the size of the economy. According to the World Bank, the country's total public expenditure declined from 14% of GDP in 2012 to 10% of the GDP in 2016, the lowest among regional, aspirational and structural peers ranked within the same period. This translates to a decline in capital spending for a rapidly growing population, a concern that featured prominently at the just concluded National Council on Finance and Economic Development (NACOFED) in Kaduna.
Because as a country, we're endowed with multiple natural resources, and we must collectively look at how we can harness the potentials of the other sources of revenues that we have in our country.
The government of Nigeria acknowledges that bold actions are required to address years of underinvestment in human capital. It has established a human capital working group made up of key agencies of the government, the private sector, non-government actors and development partners.
The consensus here is that Nigeria's low public expenditure levels are largely due to having one of the lowest revenue to GDP globally, with most subnationals being unable to make significant income outside the Federation account.
How do you have 84 million people registered as voters and you only have 19 of them in the dark side? And out of those 19, over 80% of them are paying taxpayers, which means that most people who do not have a regular job outside government or small businesses are outside our tax net. So what happens with all the revenues that they make? which in effect means that there are a lot of people out there that own small businesses that make a lot more money than civil servants, yet they pay no taxes.
We really need to collect, taxes and block the leakages and remove, corruption and remove bureaucracy. You can only do that successfully if you are using e-government, platform.
The call for diversification is not new, and as oil revenue remains the mainstay of the economy, experts say the states have to devise means of generating revenue to enable them deliver good governance to the people.
Well, I've been joined by John Mutu of Friends of Democracy to take a look at the issues surrounding revenue generation and distribution by subnationals and the transparency of the process. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, viewers.
Okay. What is the role of revenue generation in any budget?
Okay, I think revenue, like every other budget, we have two sides of the budget. We have the expenditure, then we have the revenue aspect of the budget. Revenue specifically focuses on raising the required resources to be able to fund the expenditure aspect of the budget. So if your revenue is doing well, you have enough money to be able to fund your development plans for the state. So revenue is very, very critical for the budget process.
Okay, can you give us a perspective of revenue generation in the country?
Like we know, it's been a recurring issue. Unfortunately, like it's been said, most of the, especially at the state levels or at the subnational level, most of our states cannot survive on their own without the statutory transfer from the federation account. So what I'm trying to say in essence is that revenue generation has been very, very low, especially at the state level, and even worse at the local government level, and even at the federal level we're not doing too well. Beside the oil revenue, non-oil revenue is very, very poor in this country, and we need to do everything possible to increase the generation of non-oil revenue.
Okay. Are you saying that the oil, revenue from oil is a factor?
Yeah, because if you remember, when Nigeria attained independence in the early in 1960, up till when we were operating the first Federal Republic in 1960 to 63, or 66, when we were operating the regional system of government, where every region generates its revenue and utilize it. You notice that the north was doing very well when you used to have the groundnut pyramid, while the southwest we used to have the cocoa and all that, while the southeast was more or less looking at coal and the oil revenue. But since the military came in, we had a unique, cultural economy where all emphasis is only on oil production. So once the oil is not performing well, other sources of revenue has been abandoned over the years, and it's only now based on the realization that we can't continue to go this way. That's where maybe the current government is doing all it can to diversify the economy. But how much that is being taken at the state level is much is left to be desired.
Okay, tax is one of the globally recognized source of revenue.
That's true.
And would you agree that it's optimally utilized today?
When you say optimally utilized, there are two levels. One is the generation. So the first question is, are we effectively generating revenue through taxes? And if it is, what about the utilization of those resources? And those are the two questions. And largely in this country, even though we know that revenue is quite a big challenge, the little that is generated, how effectively is it being utilized? And like most scholars will tell you, corruption is so endemic that even the little that is generated is filtered away through other means, and that to a large extent has also discouraged taxpayers from going ahead to pay taxes, because the little that we are paying, how effectively is it being utilized?
What is the role of transparency in this?
Transparency more or less is talking about open governance, openly, transparently utilizing the resources. So it starts from the point of generation. How much has the government raised through taxes, and how are those funds applied? Because as of today, especially at the state level, if you look at the state budget, you can't really tell how much is being generated, because when you look at the budget performance on an annual basis, you will see, if you look at the revenue budget, governments, some state governments will tell you we are going to raise maybe 40 billion through taxation. But at the end of the day, nobody comes back to tell us how much was actually generated. Did we raise the 40 billion, or was it 20 billion that was generated? Where were those taxes generated from? And what were those resources used for? That is what transparency is talking about. And once there is no platform for government or to those in government to come and explain to the taxpayers what was raised, through what, and what was that money used for specifically, then we are not transparent in your utilization of resources.
Why are states reluctant in accepting the open government initiative, and will it enhance revenue generation?
No, definitely. I think the open governance initiative is more or less one of those initiatives aimed at increasing transparency at the subnational and the subnational level. More or less, it's looking at maybe its core principles are talking about accountability, inclusiveness, citizens' participation, and transparency in the utilization of resources. So if you talk about accountability, every elected official must be accountable to the electorate. What were we able to generate? How much came through statutory transfer, right? How much came in through grants, right? And first, in deciding what those resources should be used for, it is expected that citizens should be consulted to identify their priorities at every point in time. And it is based on those priorities that government now goes ahead to develop its budget, and implementation commences from there. But you know, in most parts of the developing world, people don't want to be held accountable. People are so used to this opaque system of government that when you now ask the man for transparency, it is more or less seen as if people are beginning to ask unnecessary questions. But we are, thank God, Nigeria's democracy is emerging, and we are coming to a point where they can't run away anymore.
Okay,
it's a process.
Okay, can you paint the ripple effect of that?
The ripple effect is more or less, you know, it's a social, especially when you talk about taxation, it's a social contract. I pay tax, you give me service. And when you're not delivering the service, then I have no obligation to continue to pay tax. And that is why you see that while government will continue to drive towards improving its internally generated revenue, citizens will continue to cut corners because they are not sure of what those monies will be used for. So you see people under-declaring their taxes. You see people who are even making huge sums of money will continue to tell you that they are recording losses because they are not sure of what that money is going to give. And I give an example of Lagos. Most of Lagos generated revenue, internally generated revenue, comes through taxation. And that is because over time, people have come to see what the taxpayers' money is used for. That is a classical example of what taxation can do to an economy. But how many of other states have been able to demonstrate that level of openness to be able to win the confidence of the citizenry to be able to pay taxes is the question we need to.
Okay, what do you think that should be done to improve revenue generation at all levels?
First, it starts from winning the confidence of the citizenry. A government must be able to carry its citizens along and be able to build confidence over time. This is my development plan for this state. This is what you have elected me to do. And because of the cash crunch, you know, arising from the shortfall in oil generation and the prices of crude oil, we can no longer continue the way we used to be, you know, but we must generate revenue internally. And this is what we plan to do. These are the areas we expect to generate revenue for. And try to market it to the citizenry. And, you know, balance it with what you want to do. And gradually, as you generate the revenue, also be able to demonstrate what you are able to do, and gradually will continue to grow the tax base. The second aspect of it is also, in most cases, government talk about taxation, but what are the incentives that we provided to grow the economy? Because it's like the chicken and the egg, which one comes first? Should we support SMEs, the business environment, enhance the capacity of businesses to enable them pay taxes? Or do you continue to impose taxes and continue to milk the few that are struggling to survive dry? So what are the incentives government is putting into place to ensure that businesses grow and be able to pay taxes? On the other hand is the personal income tax that civil servants pay. If their salary is so mere that they can't even take care of their little basic needs, and you continue to deduct taxes, and they are not even able to see what that taxation is used for, You understand? So it's more or less boils down to transparency, engaging the citizens in such a way that at least you are able to have a win-win situation both for government and the citizens.
Okay, now, do you think that this dependency on the federal government going to the center to get the chunk of the cake, is it sustainable?
It is not. And I think that is where the whole debate about restructuring delves around, you know. And I start with an example. The VAT, right? Value added tax. If you go to the US, for instance, a huge chunk of their states generated revenue comes from sales tax, and that is the equivalent of our own VAT. As of today, the federal government is the only entity that is empowered to collect sales tax. No states can take collect sales tax. So a state like Lagos, who has invested a lot of resources to attract businesses, all right, and has generated a huge sum of the VAT, and you now collect that money and distribute it across the 36 states. It does not provide any incentive for people to work hard. So diversify and allow restructure, all right? Devolve powers to states and let them be able to generate revenue. Look at the coal deposit in the southeast. Because it is in the exclusive list, as much as the state government want to extract those resources, they can't because they don't have the powers to do that. But it's only the government, the federal government, that can exploit those resources. Come to the solid minerals in the north. State governments also cannot exploit those resources because it is in the exclusive, and the federal government is not really doing much about it. So if you devolve power and allow them to exploit their own natural resources and allow them to pay taxes, same way with the crude oil, allow states to explore them and pay taxes. And that way you create competition among states, you incentivize states to want to generate revenue. And the last part of it is even what at the local government level. It's become so bad that even signboard advertisements, tax that ordinarily is supposed to be generated by local governments, state governments have hijacked that. So local governments are lying there without any source of revenue, and that's why you see them taxing wheelbarrow, radio tax and all that, because most of their sources of revenue has been hijacked by the state government.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. John Mutu.
You're welcome.
Friends of Democracy. Thank you
so much
for your contribution.
Thank you so much.
Now, moving on. The nation's stock market weakened in the month of November, losing by as much as 581 billion naira. Bosede Abel gives us a summary of the market performance in the week ended Friday, 30th November 2018.
The stock market report for week ended Friday 30th November 2018 indicated that the NSE All Share Index depreciated by 2.54% to close at 30,874.17 basis points, while market capitalization stood at 11.2 trillion naira. All other indices finished lower, with the exception of the NSE ASM, NSE Insurance and NSE Consumer Goods indices that finished higher by 0.09%, 4.71% and 0.08%. A total turnover of 1.1 billion shares worth 14.2 billion in 15,841 deals were traded last week by investors on the floor of the exchange. The consumer goods industry followed with 83.001 million shares worth 4.2 billion naira in 2,802 deals. The third place was industrial goods industry with a turnover of 60.7 million shares worth 1.9 billion naira in 1,639 deals. In the top three equities, Diamond Bank PLC, Access Bank PLC and Universal Insurance PLC accounted for 512.5 million shares worth 1.3 billion naira in 1,437 deals. There was no trade recorded for exchange-traded products ETPs last week. 686 units of federal government bonds valued at 16.4 million naira were traded in 10 deals. In the price movement charts, 25 equities appreciated in price, 41 equities depreciated, while 103 equities remained unchanged. The gainers table was led by Continental Reinsurance PLC, and Better Glass as well as Cotex PLC. The decliners company had Diamond Bank, Prestige Assurance PLC and Unity Bank. This was closely followed by Associated Bus Company.
Now, the Nigerian Stock Exchange closed Monday's traded in negative territory. The all-share index depreciated by 0.24% to close 30,798.76 basis points. Market capitalization stood at 11.243 trillion naira. Temporary truce by U.S. and China ease tensions in global stock markets. Bosede Abel has a rundown of performance of some key markets across the globe.
Global stocks began Monday 3rd December mostly positive after the United States and China agreed to postpone tariff escalation. In Africa, most stock markets opened Monday 3rd December on a positive note. South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40, Tunisia's Tunidex, Ghana's GSA Composite Index, Namibia Overall Index and Nairobi All Share started the day on the rise. Stocks in Asia saw gains on Monday after President Donald Trump and Xi Jinping agreed to a temporary trade truce between the United States and China. Nikkei added 1.00%, Shanghai Composite Index 2.57%, and the Hang Seng Index also rose 2.55%. European stocks rallied Monday morning after President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping negotiated a temporary truce to their trade conflicts over the weekend. DAX appreciated 2.64%, FTSE 100 2.29%, and CAC 40 also advanced 2.07%. U.S. stock market futures rose after U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping agreed to a 90-day temporary suspension in the trade war that has weighed heavily on global stock markets for the most of 2018. The Dow Jones Industrial Average appreciated 0.79%, the S&P 500 0.82%, and the Nasdaq Composite Index also topped 0.79%.
The rail sector in Africa needs an annual investment of about $20 billion to bring it to the required level. President of the African Export-Import Bank, Professor Benedict Orama, disclosed this while signing a memorandum of understanding with Russian Railways and the Russian Export Center in Moscow. The MOU is an agreement between Afrexim Bank and the two other parties to cooperate in implementing export and investment projects in the railway sector in Africa. Under the terms of the MOU, the parties will cooperate by undertaking mutual consultations and export and investment projects in the railway sector abroad and by jointly developing project financing schemes in the sector. Nigeria has, through the Debt Management Office, offered for subscription the federal government of Nigeria savings bond. The 2-year FGN savings bond due December 12, 2020 is at an interest rate of 12.402% per annum. FGN savings bond due December 12, 2021, 13.402% per annum. A quick look at currency market where the Naira held its grounds. Remember to send us your feedback via email businessexpress@nta.gov.ng. You can also reach us through our Twitter and the handle is NTA News Now. Don't forget to use the hashtag BizExp showing there on your screen. Until we come your way again, I am Musa Abubakar. Do have a nice week.